Regional Collaborative. And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And I'll pass it on to Colleen for now.
Hello, my name's Colleen Cruz, and I'm actually the finance manager here at UCSC. And as you can see, I keep fading out from dark to light. So, if I just go completely dark all of a sudden, just know I'm here. I'm just in the dark. But I'm just going to start out with just kind of going over a little bit of the training here. Feel free to stop me. I mean, we're obviously going to give, questions and answers at the end, but feel free to ask any questions as I'm going through something. It might be easier when we're discussing it to kind of go over those questions anyway. So I'm just going to start off with the first item that's on the agenda, and that's just the allowable expenses tab that is on the agenda. And that's basically just the very first worksheet, if you want to call it the tab that's on these budgets. And this is just kind of for you guys to just give kind of like some guidance as far as the allowable expenses on the grant. So as we, if things get updated, if there's new per diem rates, or if something changes, we get new information, we always try to add it to this particular tab. So if you have a question about something, this is a very good resource to come to. We have the California Human Resources website there, that link that will give you, the per diem. And it's a good resources when you're thinking about travel. If something is, allowable or something like that, that is the website that we use in order to find out those rates. So we're just trying to, give you as much information as we have in order to find out these things. So that's just probably a good resource to go to if you have anything allowable. But if something isn't on here, or I would say if you ever have a question, if something is allowable or not, please reach out first to us and see if it's allowable rather than doing it first and asking forgiveness, because obviously when it comes to contacting grants, the rule is not to do it first and ask for forgiveness later, because usually in that scenario, we usually have to say no, and then you guys might be stuck with that expense, and we definitely don't want that to happen. So if there's anything that you think might be questionable, please, shoot us an email and we can let you know if that is something that would be allowable. And so does anybody have any questions about that tab, or where you might want to go? Feel free to speak up or unmute, or I see there are some chats, but I'm not really watching
I'm
it.
keeping an eye on the chats, and so
Okay.
if questions come up, I'll try to let you know.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
But we might want to put the link to the piece that you're showing right now in the chat.
Oh, okay. Katya, can you?
I'll do that.
Yes.
Okay, all right. I was gonna say it is on the agenda. Okay, perfect. And so we obviously want to get to as much information as we can, but if you get one takeaway from this training, the most important thing that I think is going to help you, is going to help us, is to create some kind of a separate code for your expenses on this grant, whether that's an activity code, an account code, something that's going to distinguish these costs from other costs at your institution. Because as a lot of you know, some of you have Cycle 1 funding, some of you have Cycle 2 funding, some of you are a backbone as well as others, and we keep all of these budgets separate. And so that's very important to making sure that the budgets is separate, which means your expenses are going to need to be separate. So keeping, a separate code, you might have a faculty member that is 10% on this grant, and the other, that other 90% is expense someplace else on different funds. And so just making sure that that 10% is easily You can easily see that on your labor reports that only 10% is getting expensed onto this grant. Is going to make your documentation a lot easier, and it's going to make it so that when you send in those invoices and we submit those to the sponsors, that it's going to make it so they don't have a lot of questions for back and forth, and that's going to delay invoices and all those kinds of things. So very strongly encourage you all to somehow, if you can, create a separate code in your financial systems in order to distinguish the expenses for this CCRC.
Can I ask a question about that? This is Michelle calling from Cal State Channel Islands. We do have a separate code set up for this fund. We've already established that, but so we don't need to keep a separate code for cycle 1 and cycle 2, though, do we?
Yes, you do.
Okay,
If it's a separate subaward, so if you got two different contracts and you have different subawards and they're separate budgets, then we consider those two separate. You're going to have two separate POs. So when your invoices are going to come in, and those cover sheets that we'll talk about a little bit later, they're going to have two separate POs. And so your expenses are going to need to have, they're going to need to be separated.
Okay, so we basically need to treat cycle 2 as a new grant.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, so down to the next item is only submit paid or posted expenses for reimbursement. So you might have things that are going to hit in the future, but obviously this is a reimbursable grant, and so we can only pay you for things that have actually hit your ledgers. So when you're submitting those invoices, we have to have your financial reports that show that these things have actually been paid. So any of your invoices, we can't pay off of a PO. We can only pay off of an invoice that has been paid, and it shows that it's been paid on your financial ledgers. As far as IDC, or some people, I know that some people have very, I guess what they call this, but IDC is just the indirect cost, and that's, some people call it an admin charge. I know that it's just been labeled different things, but that the max on this grant is 5%. So it doesn't matter what your institution, if they have a 27% IDC rate, you still cannot charge. 5% is the most that the sponsor will allow. But I know that there's other institutions that they only have a 4%, that they're only allowed a 4%. So that is the most that subaward can charge, is that 4%. So we say a max of 5%, but if your institution is bound by a lower percent, then that is what you need to put on your budget. So just knowing that 5% is the most, but if your institution has a different rate, you will have to go with that rate if it is lower than the 5%. Does anybody have any questions regarding that at all?
No.
Okay, all right, perfect. Okay, so now we'll just move down to the reporting requirements that need to be attached to your invoices. Oh, you know what? Actually, she just pulled up the expenditure, our submission deadlines. Just want to make you aware of these, and these are just, so we have to submit our reports obviously to the sponsor by certain dates. And so, and on your contracts that were signed for each of these subawards, that it was part of, in order to be compliant, you have to submit quarterly invoices. So basically, if you have any expenses in a quarter, we need to receive a quarterly invoice. If you want to submit them monthly, if that's easier for your institution, you certainly can. but you at least have to submit a quarterly invoice. If you don't have any expenses in a quarter, it would just be a nice gesture on your and our part to just send us an email letting us know that. That way we don't have to hound you and be like, are you just late with that? Or if you don't have any expenses, then just shoot any of us, all of us, just an email stating that so that we know that it's a matter that we can move on, because our invoices, we do have to submit them in order. And so you can't submit an invoice, you know, for March expenses and then go back to like December and submit. So we do have to do them chronologically. So just make sure, you know, that if you don't have any invoices in that quarter, to just let us know, and then we can know to move on. But we have attached this, our requirements as far as what we have to submit to the sponsor. And so we have given you these due dates as far as what we need to be submitted by our sub-awards. Does anybody have any questions about those? Obviously we send out reminders, you know, letting you know, hey, we've got this deadline coming up. So make sure that you guys get your invoices in on time.
Colleen, there's a question in the chat that said, if an invoice was not paid or posted on the ledger in the quarter we are invoicing, can we include it on the next invoice?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Okay, then now I'll move to the just the supporting documents. Most importantly is just making sure that it makes sense to like somebody else. If they were looking at that invoice, if you have the documentation that matches up to what you're submitting. And by that, I just mean we need to know, you know, for each expense line to match the cost submitted for that reimbursement. So if you're submitting a salary report from your institution, you know, we was paid. And when was this for? You know, was for this March's payroll, April's payroll? When was this for? And you know, does it make sense based upon your budget why it is that we're paying this person? So say, for example, on your budget, you know, because knowing that maybe some of you, you didn't really build these budgets, but you're the one that's going to be submitting these invoices. You can see on those the budgets that are sent, you know, you have your budget on one tab, and then you have your working budget of where you're actually putting your line, you know, those the line items of how much you've spent in each category. Because we wanted to, there you go, Katya has that pulled up. We wanted to show you that, you know, here's what your budget was, and then the working budget is where you put those. But we wanted to make sure you had access to those budgets so that when you're submitting, say, payroll, if you have put on your, you know, for example, on this one, this sample budget that we have, if you have a program, if for say, you only have a project director on your salary line item, but then on your invoice, you're submitting payroll for, you know, students or for a faculty member, that's when we're going to question and say, why are we paying this person? Because on your budget, you only had a project director that you were paying salaries for. So it's just things like that, that it's like making sense of why would we be paying salary for this person when on your budget, you didn't mention anything about paying this person. So, you know, just kind of going through and making sure that things make sense on that documentation is just going to save a lot of time with the back and forth between us and you verifying what, you know, what makes sense on those invoices. And then just along those lines, if you could just send us, you know, a complete packet of when your invoice is done. So just meaning, you know, don't send us like an email that's like, oh, here's our salary report, and then another email, here's our travel. If it's just when you get that invoice all complete and done, just send us the one packet that says, here's everything, and it's ready to be reviewed. Will be a lot easier than just piecing things together and send little small things as you have them. Let's see. So we talked about payroll, the travel and food, just showing what the event was, the dates. If you have an agenda, that would be also helpful, so we can see who actually came on it. And making sure on those, like any receipts, we need an itemized receipt for meals. I understand that a lot of institutions, per your travel policy, especially if you guys are paid like a just an allowable, like you got $30 say for dinner, and you guys don't have to submit any receipts for that. Unfortunately, our sponsor requires that, and so we are going to need an itemized receipt for your dinner purchase in order for that to get reimbursed. So we do unfortunately have to follow the sponsor guidelines. That's the one that is the trump card, and so just make sure that you are submitting itemized receipts for especially travel when it comes to those type of expenses.
Can
We
you
do.
can you explain that? Because like if we have something catered,
Huh?
how would that be itemized?
Well, when I mean itemize the catering, so like we can't see, so say you paid $500 for that catering event,
Mm-hmm.
we were able to accept a credit card receipt showing that you paid $500. We're going to need to see that invoice that shows you paid $200 for chicken and $100 for a plate of rice. Like itemized, meaning we need to know what that $500 actually went towards.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Any more questions? And
Well, Colleen, wouldn't we also need to know how many people were at the event, because we can only spend so much per head?
correct. Yes. So that's why I say on the agenda and the participants. So yes, exactly. How many were actually at the event? Correct.
Okay.
A list of the participants.
Got it.
And so we've already talked about itemized receipts, and then of course paid invoices on your purchase orders. We kind of already touched on that, but anything, anything that you are putting on your ledger, we need to have an invoice for. We have to have the documentation. So like I say, I get that a lot of institutions don't require that much backup, but this is a sponsor that does require documentation for every expense that we put on here. So I'll just warn you right now that if you submit something and we don't have documentation for it, we will come back and ask you for that documentation, because we know that the sponsor is going to be asking for that when we submit it to them.
We have another sponsor like that requires backup on every charge. So we know what's expected on that. Yeah.
Yep, we've asked them, are you sure you want this 1,500 page report? And they're like, yep, we need documentation for everything. So
Yeah, it's usually on the subawards when it's
yeah.
a subaward.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it makes it long. I guess they,
Yeah, we understand. Yeah. Got it. Thank you.
yeah, no problem. Okay, so we do just have, like say, that example budget that we just kind of wanted to give you an example of what an example budget would look like. But like I say, these have already been established and been approved if you've already got your contract and your PO. But this is what they should look like. But we just wanted to show you because, like I say, a lot of you might not have been involved in creating this budget, but now you might be involved in the invoicing part of that. So we just want you to see this is how it should correlate, that if you have, a salary line item, that is going to be where, and so we, to go along with that, we've also created an example invoicing. So And Katya, actually, she's the one that's pulling these things up for me on the screen so that you can see them on the screen sharing. But we wanted to just show you that your working budget is how you're going to be keeping track of the expenses that you're going to be putting per invoice. So let's say you have put, for this invoice for the first quarter, you're going to spend $10,500 on salaries, and you're going to spend $47.25 on benefits. Just going across, I won't, you obviously can read spreadsheets and everything, but just going across that, here's how much you spent, and you do have to put it in each category, right? And then just showing, here's how much is on this first invoice. And so the total of what that line, that 27,000, that is what should match up on the invoice cover sheet, which she'll pull up right now. This is your invoice cover sheet. That one of these has to be submitted with each invoice. But those amounts that Katya's having right now, that 10,500, that should match up exactly to what you have on your working budget. And so just making sure, that those match up is going to obviously be crucial to making sure that what you're putting on here is matching the work budget, so that when we get done, your budget, what you guys say you have, is going to match up exactly with what we say that you have, is going to be obviously very important to both of us, so that at the end of the year, all of the numbers match. And going along with that, obviously, the cumulative, you'll want to, make sure, because obviously the first column is just the invoice that you'll be submitting, whether this is a monthly, a quarterly, that's just for that particular invoice. But just making sure, obviously, that your cumulative matches as well is going to be very important, so that when you get done at the end of the year, that those numbers match up as well. So there's not a huge discrepancy. You guys think that you have $25,000 left at the end of the year, and we show you have zero. That's going to be very important. So just keeping a close eye, I guess, would be very important on your working budget versus what you're putting on those cover sheets, to make sure that everything is matching up when you submit those to us. And we obviously, will, review those as well, and making sure that if something looks odd to us, that we'll reach out and let you know that something didn't look correct. But just reviewing those before you send them in will be very beneficial. Along with those cover sheets, making sure, that they get signed, because we won't obviously accept them unless they are signed off, saying that you guys do, that statement in there is just basically saying that you, to the best of your knowledge, this is all expenses that should belong on this grant. And that just kind of saves us and you from any kind of discrepancies later on in the future, that to the best of our knowledge, these are legitimate and allowable expenses that can go towards this grant. And then, we just kind of, on the bottom of that, we have a little invoice checklist to just kind of help you guys out. So if you review that before submitting, hopefully we've kind of touched on everything that will be helpful to you guys to making sure that your invoices get paid on time. Obviously, you've spent the money, so we want to make sure that we get the money, the reimbursement to you as quick as possible. So if you follow that checklist, hopefully these will get processed as quickly as possible. Kudos goes out to Katya. I know she gets these processed very quickly. So as long as everything is in order, she has a very quick turnaround on getting these processed and out back to you guys in a form of payment. So did anybody have any questions? I know I kind of just went over that quick, but does anybody have any question? And feel free, if you guys, there's that putting your PO numbers. If you don't know what your PO number, or if there is a question about you don't know what should on there, please reach out. Instead of leaving something blank, please reach out to us if you don't know about a field on this cover letter, please reach out and let us know. And then we can direct you rather than leaving something blank, because then it'll just be, like I say, back and forth. But did anybody have any questions as far as the working budget worksheet or the cover letter or anything that I've talked about so far about documentation or any of those items? All right, we've got a quiet group today.
I actually have a question when it comes to
Okay.
payroll.
Okay.
For the quarter invoices, sometimes here at my institution, we experience delays in posting payroll to our
Mhm.
actual ledger. It is possible for us to obtain what will be posted from another database, which we get from the county. Would you accept that as backup for payroll expenses, even though they're not officially on our payroll ledger?
I mean, I would recommend probably waiting until those hit your actual ledger and just putting those payroll on your next invoice.
Um,
The only exception I would say to that is when we get to the end of the grant and we don't have a very quick, as you can see, that final expenditure report is July 15th. You know, the grant ends June 30th of 2026, and they don't give us a lot of time to get that final one in. Obviously we'll maybe ask for some leniency and maybe get a little bit more time, but you have to submit that to us by July 15th. So that's not a lot of time. So that might be the scenario where we might accept that, because we do want to get obviously all of the expenses in by that deadline. So that might be the one time that we might say, yeah, go ahead and use that other system, just so that we, you know, because once we submit our final expenditure report, you know, we're kind of done. Like, we're saying this is all we're going to submit.
Thank you.
I have a question along the same lines. California State Channel Islands again. We typically do not close our books. They're not closed finally until the 15th of the following month.
Mhm.
So making that July 15th date is going to be extremely difficult.
Yeah, and like I say, and we understand that, and so that's why I say is we're obviously going to be asking for a little bit of leniency. I mean, it's cutting it very close for us as well, because ours usually don't post until sometimes the 10th or 11th. So it's going to be very tight, I think, on a lot of people. So we'll, you know, they've been very kind. So I'm
Okay,
crossing my fingers that they do allow us a little bit of extra time on that final report to get
Be-
some in. So as it gets
because
closer. Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
because
go ahead.
like Steven said, our payroll is processed by the state controller's office.
Mhm.
And so we don't get the download until the end of the month, and then by the time we close the month, it is close to the 15th of the following month.
Mhm.
So if we get down to the wire and it's
Mhm.
about the 15th of the month
Sure.
for that last invoice,
Mhm.
and it looks like we're not going to make that date,
Mhm.
what do you recommend we do?
Yeah, and that's why I say I think when it gets a little bit closer, we will talk to the sponsor and see what we can do about that. And perhaps I'm just thinking that we will ask for maybe like a 30-day extension and maybe
Okay,
push it out
okay.
until, you know, instead of having to, because that the 15th is when we're asking for you to get our stuff. I believe our deadline is July 31st. So I'm hoping that maybe I should consult with
Well,
John about this, but
nope.
I'm at least hoping that we can push that out to August 31st, that we could ask him to maybe give us an extra 30 days to get that final.
And
That's,
who should I reach out to?
Well, I
uh,
think it would be really helpful if this is going to be a problem, is just to communicate with us, either Colleen, Katja, myself, or your program lead to our regional coordinator and just say, we're not going to get this done, but here's when we expect to have it done, that's helpful for us. We'd rather have that than not hearing anything.
Okay,
We'll work with you. We understand.
okay,
Yeah.
okay, and that's also our fiscal year end too, so,
Right.
okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
and we only based our schedule based on the schedule we got from the state. You know, we're funded through the Office of Public School Construction, strangely enough, at the state of California, and they've been accommodating with us at times, and I think that we'll be able to work with them, but we need you to work with us so we can articulate that clearly to them.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, that is kind of all I had. Does anybody have any follow-up questions? Any jokes that they just needed to tell today? I wish I had. I wish I was better joke teller, but I did not have anything else. So if nobody had anything, I'll turn it back to John.
Well, thank you, Colleen, and thank you for the work that you and Katya do all the time to take the information that we get from all of our institutional partners, so we can turn around and get the money back out to you as quickly as possible. We're here to support you. Our financial team and the collaborative staff is here to help this happen, right? For our program leads around data and other things, we work with them. But for you as the financial folks, we're here to support you to get this information in so we can get the money back out to you. So thank you for taking the time on a Friday afternoon to participate in this training. We are going to post this on our website probably on Monday if there's any part of it you want to go back to. But you can also reach us at any time. Just look at the invite and you'll be able to find our email addresses. And also the items that were talked about today and the materials that you saw are also available in links in the invitation for these trainings. So you can go back and pull that out anytime you want. Thanks again for being here, and we look forward to getting lots of paperwork from you around April 15th.
Thank you. Have a great weekend.